Hey guys, Nathan here. Now, as you can see within the video title, I'm going to be going over my experience with binge eating and how I overcome it and what sort of tools that I put in place for myself as someone who was helping people at the time, but yet I was also struggling at the time. This video goes pretty deep and I probably go on some tangents as well, but these are going to go over 5 things that either I wish I knew or I wish I could have laid out in front of me if I was someone experiencing binge eating or even food addictions or just not being able to control my diet. And binge eating was a big part of my life for really, as funny as it sounds, binge eating was a part of my life when I got into the fitness industry. So we'll go over that a little bit in detail, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into, I've been doing fitness and health for a very long period of time, 13 years to be exact, and it took me many, many years to get it right. It took me many, many years to coach it right, but it also took me so many years just to get it right for myself. And you know what? I still have hard days. I still find it not necessarily always easy. I still find it a bit of a task that I've got to work on every single week. But you know what? There is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, okay? And if you've experienced binge eating or if you are experiencing binge eating or food addiction type tendencies, maybe these 5 things could help you. This is my experience. I'm not saying that these are 5 things that are absolutely going to cure yours if you are experiencing it, but hey, maybe you can learn something from these 5 things, okay? These are 5 things that I wish I knew, or at least I wish I could have a list that I could have ticked off and really tried to understand what's going on here, okay? Now, my point number 1 is becoming open and honest with myself of what I was actually doing and of what I was actually doing, but what it actually was, how often I was actually doing it, really becoming clear and transparent with what I was actually doing with clean eating, say Monday to Friday, and then finding myself in these positions over the weekend where I'm binge eating, whether it's, whether it's with social settings or not social settings, but I was the type of person that would binge eat behind the scenes. I would go out to your family events, or I would go out to your friends' events and things like that, or go out and drink, and I would be the healthy guy. I would stay face. I would be the person that I say that I am, and then unfortunately sometimes behind closed doors, it wasn't always the same picture. So my point number 1, or my really big number 1 for myself, was to be really honest with myself. And that took me to write it down. It's something as simple as that, but it took me to write it down as to what I was doing. And I knew that I was binge eating, but to label it that felt like I had a problem. And I did have a problem, but I had to kind of come to terms with the fact that I actually had a problem, and that was a really, really big step, especially for myself, who I was training clients every single day, Monday to Sunday basically, helping them on their path to fitness, and I was behind the scenes kind of struggling with these sorts of things. But that's something that I wish that I did much, much earlier, is I sat down with myself and I was honest. I didn't kind of get carried away, and I just looked in the mirror and I was just super honest with what I was doing. Didn't have an answer for it, but I kind of come to terms with the fact that I don't have control over this, and this is something that is becoming an issue, whether it was because I was gaining weight or whether it was because it was just causing me mental anguish, mental struggles. There's a lot of things that it does cause, and it's not necessarily just how you look physically. How you feel obviously goes into it quite a fair bit, okay? But that would be my point number 1 for myself, is that I needed to acknowledge what I was actually doing, and that took a lot of balls to do. It was really, really hard, because I would find myself being the healthy guru, 6 days of the week, and then I could get to the end of the week and find myself at 7-Eleven at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night, when I'd done all this hard work throughout the week, and Sunday was my relaxing day, if you want to call it that, and I would start a little bit early, obviously, hence being there at 7-Eleven, where I could buy and purchase basically any bit of junk food that I wanted to binge on, around midnight or even just slightly earlier, 10 p.m. So acknowledging that and writing it down, and writing down that that was a habit or that was something that I was doing quite regularly was really, really hard. But I think that was a big step in me realizing that this is a serious problem that I probably need to help myself get out of this. That's my point. That is the one thing that I wish I probably done a little bit earlier, is be honest with myself and be real. It's hard to have a hard conversation with yourself. It's very easy to have a hard conversation with someone else, but to do it with yourself and be open and honest. You know, they say, treat yourself like you are treating others. Like you were trying to help others, but you should help yourself the same. It's really quite hard if you've ever actually tried. Okay. I'm going to dive into point number 2. It is then trying to identify, once you've written it down and you understand what you're actually doing, it is now trying to analyze, identify patterns and cycles, okay? Like these binge eating cycle, particularly for myself, was a pattern. There was a pattern to it. It was very cyclical. What started the binge? Why would it be usually on a Saturday night, or how did it come at play in the first place? And it was really trying to identify, which took a fair bit of time and a lot of failure, to be honest. And this, when I'm talking about these 5 things, like I didn't just come up with these 5 things willy-nilly. These are 5 things that I've taken many, many years to understand. Now, to identify the patterns is I had to look at just the broad approach of what I was doing. I was in the fitness industry. I was helping people train. I was training very regularly and very intensely myself. I was very much trying to eat as healthily as I possibly could. That would tend to eat very little amount of food as well, which we'll come to in a second. But I needed to identify the patterns, okay? I think, in my opinion, this whole binge, my experience for my binge eating was a reward cycle. It was like, right, I'm gonna do all of this effort, and then for some reason I deserve to do that at the end of the week. It made no sense. It makes no sense still, but in my head, go back many, many years ago, I think this is like 8 or 9 years ago that this was kind of occurring, and it happened for a couple of years. I needed to find what the pattern was and what was actually kicking this kind of rolling on. It was the same pattern. I could, now basically looking back, I can basically predict of when it's going to happen, or if it was going to happen, and I can obviously cease it now because I'm aware of these patterns and I have identified them, so I can kind of stop it before it starts. But going through this process while you're actually going through this whole ordeal is quite hard. But that would be a thing for yourself to think about if you are experiencing these sorts of things, is trying to identify, are there patterns? Do you do the same things every single week, and is it the same time? Try and think about what's the lead up to that time frame. What was the lead up for me on a Saturday, and then to allow myself to completely relax on Sundays, which is what I would always do and call it a cheat day, if that's what you want to call it. But I would always kind of sneakily start it on Saturday night at 10 p.m. I'd probably just break, right? I would mentally kind of go, oh, I'm over it, I'm done, Sunday's basically here, let's get going. And then obviously that reward would kick in, hence the binge eating would start. And the cycle would, I'd then go and binge eat, and that would carry on into Sunday. And then I'd get up on Monday and I'd go, right, okay, time to start the new week, time to, do the whole, which would realistically start the whole cycle again, which we'll get into detail. But that's what I would definitely recommend as my point number 2. I needed to identify what was the cycle and what was the pattern, and writing that down and trying to be clear about what my patterns throughout the week was really quite important. Being honest with myself, it kind of all correlates back to point number 1, which is being realistic with myself, being honest with myself, and having that open communication style conversation with myself. And like I said, like to be honest and to really have a conversation with yourself, it's really quite hard. It's quite confronting. It's very easy to tell other people what to do, but it's very hard to tell yourself what to do and then actually go and do it. Number 3, this is sort of going into like identifying what sort of causes these patterns and cycles for me to have what I was occurring, or what was actually happening, is this idea around chronically trying to eat less and exercise more. Now, from majority of my life, maybe not the last 5 years, since I feel like I've finally got the hang of this whole thing, and it's taken me many, many years. I'm 32, so let's say maybe 5 or 6 years I've had it worked out, if you want to call it that. 32, 5 to 6 years, there's 25 years there. where I didn't have it worked out. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just eating willy-nilly, and obviously allowed these binge eating cycles to kind of either commence or just get quite extreme, which they did get quite extreme, particularly on some circumstances. But it was this identified the fact that I would always be pretty good Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday even, and then it would always just kind of fall downhill. And there was this acknowledgement that I would eat really healthy, like Monday to Friday, Monday to Saturday. I would be whatever you want to call really, really healthy. You know, I was clean eating. I was very lean, lean in regards to like what I was eating. There wasn't crap with it. I was really, I would have been pretty proud of what I was actually eating. But there was a lot of less food as well. So it was really little amounts of food because I thought that was healthy. I thought that was really good for me. Obviously, I had overeaten basically every Sunday. So I was trying to also make up for that as well. Hence this pattern and cycle that I kind of keep referring to. But it was this attempting to eat less and move more aggressively. But not only eat less and move more aggressively, but do it all the time. That was what I thought I had to do. And I was in this mindset where like, if I could just repeat this, what I was doing Monday to Friday or even Monday to half Saturday, if I could do that the whole week, I thought I would be perfect. I thought I would find bliss. I thought I would find health. And I thought I would obviously be able to cease this cycle. So what I would do is every week I would roll around this cycle. I would rock up onto a Monday and try and diet harder to try and make up for obviously either the week before or the weeks before with the binging that I had either occurred or taken place. So I would try and eat lesser than less. So like, every week I would try and up it. So if I was having, a certain amount of food, I would try and eat lesser than that. I would try and eat even cleaner. Removing a stack more food from my diet, like eliminating everything basically, left, right, and center. I was almost getting to a point where I was like almost vegetarian because at the time that's what I thought was healthy, and that's what basically gets perceived as being healthy. And then I was getting very, very aggressive with my training as well, right? We all get told, and I was telling this to people as well, was no pain, no gain. Make sure you push yourself as hard as you possibly can. And I was doing these things, and that would be a really big part of me doing this build-up. This actually led me into why I was actually doing what I was doing on Saturday or Sunday. I just thought there was something wrong with me. I thought like, if I can do this for 6 days, but I can't seem to string together 7 days or a 14-day period where I wouldn't have a binge eating episode or just eat the wrong food. I was so urged, and the cravings just always got the better of me. And I really thought it was just like, I just had a personality issue, like there was just something wrong with me. But if you actually look at the patterns and you actually look at what I was doing, all of that was causing it to happen. So that would be my point number 3, is my attempt to eat less aggressively and all the time, chronically, not just a phase, but all the time. And I thought that's what I had to do to lose weight and to keep it off. And then aggressively train on top of that as well. It was leading me to have this cycle, okay? And that was really hard to kind of come to, okay? Thing about this eating less and exercising a lot more, or even let's just talk about eating less, is that the response to eating less or underconsumption is the reverse, especially if you do it chronically. So the harder I tried to eat less and the harder that I tried to remove things from my diet, the more that I had the urges to go the other direction, hence causing the same cycle. So you kind of got to think about it, right? If you withdraw food from your body, or nutrients, or even energy, so you can have nutrients and energy, you can have them together, but we can also separate them. If you withdraw yourself of that, your body is going to urge you to go and get these things, and nutrients is a big part of that, right? If you remove a lot of nutrition from your diet, maybe you're just eating too little. Your body is going to urge you to go out and get a whole bunch of nutrients, and eventually it will surpass your willpower, my willpower. Like I'm usually looked at someone who has good willpower, good discipline, but really I don't. I just have good practices and a good method. I really think my motivation levels and my discipline levels are, pretty low or just normal, just average. It's kind of my systems and my method that keeps me intact, allows me to keep moving forward or get out of that cycle that I was in, or the one that I'm talking about now. So if you don't have enough energy, you're going to get that signal to go and get a whole bunch of energy. And if you don't know how to eat properly, if you've never really been taught to what sort of food is actually healthy or what food makes you feel good, then you just go to the food that you know that's best or the food that you are craving, right? Hence, leading this cycle, I would withdraw the food that I would realistically really, really want to eat or that I would have thought I wanted to eat, and I would eat really little of it, and then this would find myself in this repetitive cycle over and over and over again. This was months, this was probably even a couple of years as well that this was happening, okay? That's my point number 3. Section number 4, my point number 4 is understanding a bit about your own personality, and this takes a bit of self-reflection. And self-reflection is a big part of what I do with clients as well, is I will force them to self-reflect. And when I say force, I mean, like, just by having a conversation with me, that forces them to self-reflect. I'm going to ask how they're going. We're going to ask what have they been up to, how they feeling, what they're doing. Do you feel like it's working? There's a lot that you can get out of just self-reflecting, and a lot of people don't do it on their own. So hence why I'm someone who helps people do that. The point number 4 is, are you someone who probably should moderate or abstain? Like to stay away from something completely, or to moderate it? And to understand that it takes a lot of practice, I think, and it took me a long time to understand that as well. Understanding some foods of what you can happily have a little bit of, and then some foods where you just go crazy and it's just not worth having in your diet at all. And there's a big list for me in that. If anyone knows me well enough, especially my clients, there is a long list of foods that I won't eat just purely because it will send me down this rabbit hole all over again. I think that I'll revert to the fact that I've overeaten on all these foods, and then I would then try and undereat for an extended period of time, trying to make up for that. And then before I know it, if I kept that cycle up, I would almost find myself back in this position. Okay. But trying to find, okay, do I need to moderate what I'm doing, or should I just stay away from what I'm doing? But the problem there's problems for both. Moderation, well, if you think that you can moderate something, like alcohol could be one of them as well, but maybe a lot of people can't moderate that. Like, you just have one and then you've got to have another, or you have one and that yields, other foods that you're then going to go and eat because you just have a lack of care when you obviously drink alcohol. Or do you abstain from something and do you not have it for an extended period of time, and that urges you to really, really want it, and then you go and have it anyway? You've got to find out what works for you, and that takes a little bit of time, a little bit of practice. But in my experience, there's probably some foods that you can moderate. It's almost a balance of the two. And there are some foods where you should just abstain from. Like chips for me, whether it's like sort of hot chips or whether it's, like just your Smith chips or Red Rock Daily chips. You know what, for me, that's just a straight pass, because it's just going to yield me down a rabbit hole that I just don't want to go. It's just not going to be worth it at all. So it's much easier for me to say no altogether than actually just have like a small bowl. That's much harder for me to moderate that. Whereas there are some other things that I'm happy to moderate. Alcohol, I'm happy to moderate. Like chocolate, I'm happy to moderate. There's certain things that I'm more than happy to moderate and just kind of keep in check, to kind of join the rest of the world in these social things. Okay, that would be my 4th one, is you need to sort of really trying to find out, should you moderate, certain aspects of your diet or your nutrition, or should you abstain from it? Is that just going to lead you down a path that you shouldn't go? Okay, so let's get to the number 5. Sometimes, this is number 5, sometimes it takes you to swim up against the stream, or what do they call it, up against the current. Sometimes it takes you to go the opposite direction on what you think that you should do to get yourself out of the puddle that you're in, okay? And that was for me, that's what I needed to do, is that I was lacking a lot of nutrients and just a lot of energy in general, because I was eating less for such a long period of time throughout the week, and I was aggressively doing it, and every week that would roll around, I would try and do it more aggressively. Not to mention, I was also then trying to aggressively train on top of that as well. So I was getting this really horrible, eat less, which means my funnel for nutrients is also really, really low. So I was very nutritionally poor, but I was also over-exercising, over-exaggerating these sorts of movements, and just aggressively doing it way too often. And it was definitely causing this cycle that I was having. So what did I need to do? Well, I needed to go the opposite direction. And this was the most backwards thing ever. It was probably the hardest part out of all. All of this is pretty hard that we're talking about. It's very hard, actually. And I feel very sorry for anyone who has to go through this. But I think it's more common than not. And it's really hard for me to talk about because I'm supposed to be the guy that knows what he's talking about. Or, for when you're a trainer, you're supposed to kind of hold yourself to that sort of standard. But I reckon there's a lot of us that are actually out there struggling or had struggled. It's nice not to struggle anymore. But it took a lot of struggling to get out of that and a lot of learning. That's really where it come from. But this point number 5 is I had to go the opposite direction. I needed to spend time nourishing my body, which took eating more of yes, nutritious food, but learning about what nutritious food is. At the time, I got told fat was really bad for me. We had fat phobia. Got told saturated fat was also bad. So, there was a lot of restrictions in that sort of place. I got told that basically vegetables are the king. So my whole diet consisted of that and very, very lean protein, which really just consisted of chicken. I had to go the opposite direction. Okay, the contrarian view and start going a little bit differently. And I spent a lot of time priming my body, getting my body actually healthy, giving my body the nutrients that it needs. And I put on a couple of kilos doing that. And that was really hard because I think the whole thing that started this whole cycle was actually me wanting to lose weight and getting into the fitness industry. You had to be lean, you had to look a certain way. I'm not going to look. It was my fault that it happened, but being a part of that industry really kind of exaggerated all these different things. And so I had to swim up the other way. I had to eat more, particularly eat more of the right stuff. But it was dramatically more. I was eating very little amount of food. I had serious metabolic adaptation. I was eating very, very little and not losing any weight. But then to stop this binging cycle, I had to eat a lot more, say Monday to Saturday. And I actually had to train a lot less. That was really hard because I'm a trainer. That's what I love. That's what I love doing. That's my obsession. That's my addiction. And I understand it's a proper addiction. But look, that's what I love. And if I was to choose anything to be addicted on, I think training is probably a pretty good addiction. And I'm not really ever going to probably ever change that. But I actually just had to really pull it back. I had to slow it down. The intensity had to be considerably reduced, probably by at least 60% of what I was doing. Volume was probably 40% less. So, and that sort of brought this whole, I was eating really, really little and exercising a whole bunch to try and balance these out a whole bunch. And I reckon this took me 3 to 4 months to really get healthy. And then because I was nourishing my body and I wasn't killing myself in the gym, this binge eating basically stopped because I didn't have an urge to do it because I wasn't starving my body of nutrition. I wasn't over exaggerating my training. As you can see, as we go through these 5 things, right, it paints a beautiful picture. And I would be very surprised if there wasn't anyone else out there that is either doing this or has experienced this. I wonder what your tips would be if you've gotten yourself out of this. But this is my experience. This is what I've gone through. Nicole had to watch the whole thing and watch me come out of it, and that's really, really hard for her. And obviously those tendencies are still there. So it's not something that I just go, fixed now, I'm all better. It's something that I have to work on. That's probably why I would talk about it for the rest of my life. I will be working on this forever. But I think that's an exciting thing because you can always get improvements and you can always be better as the weeks progress. So yeah, it was weird to swim against a current or go, swim against, whatever that saying is. It was weird to eat a lot more and to really slow down. But, go fast forward 6 months from that position, I lost 10 kilos, I gained muscle, I was training way less, like I said, 40% less and easier, and my fitness just continued to rise. And then I find myself in this position, which is 5 or 6 years later, and I'm still on a good path where I feel healthy. Sure, I have my bad weeks and I have my bad moments and all those sorts of things, but I can catch these cycles and I can really get on top of them. And that took a lot of self-reflection. If I was to wrap everything up, it really goes back to that point number 1, is sitting there, identifying what are you actually doing and maybe putting it down on paper. It's so hard to write what you are actually doing and label it with something. Are you overweight? Label yourself as being overweight. If you're overweight, you're overweight. But seeing it in the writing and seeing me write binge eating hurts yourself. but you know, it's only between you and you at the end of the day. So being honest with yourself is going to go a long way. Those are my 5 things that I wish I knew a long time ago. If you got something out of this video, please hit me a like, maybe put a comment, or send me a DNM if you're really struggling, or if you know you want someone to talk to. More than happy to talk to. Yeah, if you let me know, I'd love to hear from you. All right, guys, thanks. Bye.